All right, here we go, everybody. It's time for Friendly Confines Weekly. It's our podcast that we try to throw at you every once in a while. And we're going to do it right now. We're going to recap the Cubs season thus far, where they're at right now, what you thought about the All-Star game. We're going to get into all that on the channel today. Like and subscribe, thumbs up, get in the comments section. Let's build this thing together, man. And I know it's been a frustrating first half. Nobody's cussed more at the television than Ant. We're gonna get through this. We're getting through this together as a team. Let's talk about why the second half's going to be uncubs like. We're gonna roar into the postseason. We're gonna win the World Series, everybody, and we're gonna tell you about it right after this. All right, what do you say, gang? There's Ant over there, Anthony Pasquale. I'm Mick Gillespie on the socials, as many of you guys already know, and it's awesome hearing from all of you. And Ant, we get to talk a little Cubs baseball, but before we get into all the hot topics on this podcast, I want you to tell everyone where they can catch us outside of our channel here on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. We are now on Twitter or X, however you prefer to call it, Instagram and TikTok. You can find us there, the Cubs Baseball channel. I think Twitter is the only one with a little bit of a weird name. It's like Cubs_ channel because Cubs Baseball channel was too long to put in the Twitter handle. But
Underscore.
Yeah, _ channel. So find us on there. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're going to be posting some, clips from the stuff we do on YouTube. Also, like on Twitter, asking some Cubs questions. So engage with us on there, find us, follow us, and we'll make sure to hit you back.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, great job putting all that together. And we appreciate all you guys hanging out with us as you do on a daily basis. Some of you, and if you don't, hey, come on, hang out with us here. We're not going to pretend that we're the be all end all of anything. We're just having a good time following the Cubs every day. Exactly. And hoping that this team can prove us wrong, at least me wrong. I'm ready to sell the farm here and build to the future. Cubs are 8.5 games back in the Central. That puts them in dead last after the All-Star break, right? But they're 3.5 games back in the wild card. I still feel like that is a mirage because there's so many teams ahead of them. But it is only 3.5 games back. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to sell instead of buy at the deadline. Your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, it does. It definitely makes it more difficult to sell because anybody can make up 3.5 games. I mean, you saw at the beginning of last week, the Cubs were 7 and now they're 3.5. So they already made up 3.5 games just in one 5-2 week of baseball. So if you put a few of those together, you're right in the thick of this. And it obviously, All-Star break comes at a time where you are starting to believe that this team can do that. But you mentioned it. There's so many other teams in between the Cubs and the wild card positions, and only 3 in the National League currently worse than the Cubs, which means if you do decide to buy, there's only going to be like 4 or 5 teams selling because everybody else thinks they have a chance to go make the playoffs. So that's a little bit complicated, which is kind of why this year is kind of shaping up to be more in favor of the sellers. But 8.5 back in the Central, you could obviously go on a run, but you got to jump 4 teams in order to do so. Same deal in the wild card, but you got a lot of chances to play these teams again, which the Cubs could take advantage of.
Yeah, but they haven't. I mean, let's be honest. They stink against teams in their division. They have a losing record against every single one of them, I think, right? I mean, and they're not going to win the Central. I mean, let's just be honest. 8.5 games. And it's like I look at this record at 47-51, and it feels like they really are like 40 and 60 something. I mean, like it hasn't felt like this team's had much momentum this year. April, and then right at the couple weeks before the break.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you definitely built some momentum up in the last 10 days or so. The sweep against Baltimore was as crucial of a series as you're going to get for a team like this that just needed to show not only the rest of the world, but themselves that they can beat the best of the best. And that's what they did in Baltimore. And then you thought they'd be able to keep that hot streak going on into the weekend, end up, getting blown out one of the games. They had a nice win on Sunday to end a 5-2 week, but the fact of the matter is, with the Cubs sitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams to hop just to get into that third spot, you got to put 5 and 2 weeks together pretty much for the rest of the year. And that's something we haven't seen them do at all consistently. And that's the part that I think a lot of people are a little hesitant about to believe in this team as buyers, because we've only seen it in spurts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. I mean, look at this right here. So the Braves are going to get in.
Right.
I'm as much as I hate to say it, because I know I'm biased, but I'm not a believer in the Cardinals.
I'm not either.
I mean, I know they've got Goldschmidt and Arenado, and they got some young guys, but I could see them falling off. I think the Mets are actually a pretty good team because of Grimace. Grimace kind of got them going.
So as you look at these teams above,
were you a McDonald's guy? Not to interrupt you, but were you a McDonald's kid? Like, did they take the twins to McD's as
Yeah, it was definitely preferred over like Wendy's and Burger King. I think
you liked it more, you or your brother?
I don't know. I went through spurts where it was the only food I ever wanted, and then I couldn't touch it for like years. Like I went back and forth between it. But we went sometimes after baseball games or whatever, just chicken nuggets and fries were always the go-to. But I didn't remember Grimace as a kid. Like when he came out last year with like the Grimace shake, and they were like, "Oh, it's the Grimace shake." I was like, "Who's Grimace?" I didn't remember.
Didn't know Grimace?
No, I must have blocked it out of my memory. Maybe I was afraid of him or something.
It's like Ronald McDonald's best friend, man.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that one.
Well, think about, like, first off, if Smitty's watching this show, we got this biggest Cubs fan in the world is a guy named Mark Smith, and I'm sure people watching here are going, "I know Smitty. He owns a bunch of McDonald's in Tennessee." And so my son loves McDonald's, and Smitty is great to my son. He'll hook us up with gift cards sometimes, which is so cool. Even though my son calls him Smithy, I don't know why, but McDonald's is definitely not the kind of food you want to eat on, like, if you're trying to lose weight.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean,
it's good.
Yeah, I went to a Catholic school for grade school, and one of our like gym projects was watching the movie Super Size Me.
Oh, seen that, yeah.
Yeah, which definitely deters you from getting McDonald's.
I died.
Yeah, recently, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man, they used to have buy 2 Big Macs for $2.
Wow.
And that was a deal that they had, back in the day. And on a college kid's diet, I mean, dollar, I should probably say. I ate a lot of Big Macs, and I was like, I just got so fat so fast.
Yeah.
I supersized myself.
Yeah, it definitely adds up.
It's good food, man. I do like it. Did you ever eat it the one outside of Wrigley?
Yeah, I've had it before. I've gone a few times before or after games.
So anyway, yeah, they had Grimace on their side. Let me put this back up there again. Grimace was Ronald's buddy, and
now he's Lindor's.
The Hamburglar? Do you know the Hamburglar?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do know the Hamburglar. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed Grimace, but I wanted to, just looking at this these standings. Obviously, you said you're not too keen on the Cardinals, and the Mets are a team you have a little bit of belief in, but there's still 5, 6 teams.
Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks are a good club, man.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what teams are you like? If the Cubs played a 5-game series against any of these teams, with the exception of the Braves, who do you like? I don't think there's any team that like destroys them. I think they have the pitching to compete in any series, which makes me believe, like, with the exception of the Padres, we've really struggled against them this season. We lost both series against them. Still have some work to do against the Diamondbacks. That's who we open up the second half against. But the Giants are a team I feel like we could beat. Obviously, they I think are up 4-3 in the season series. Then you got 3 teams in your own division ahead of that. I mean, none of these teams beside the Braves I look at and say, wow, they're head and shoulders above the Cubs.
I like the Pirates and the Reds' young pitching. I really do. I'm a Hunter Green guy. I saw him in the All-Star game. I've always liked him. He reminds me, everybody always wants to say, look, Dontrelle Willis or this and that. He reminds me of Nolan Ryan, man. Like that fastball, the way that he can elevate and throw, and when he gets better at the secondary stuff. And I know Nolan Ryan had the hook too, man. Like, and the meanness. I think he's got to get. I think when you throw hard like that, you got to throw a little bit inside and just kind of with that elevated fastball, like just dig it in on people. But he's someone that just as a baseball fan, I'm into him, man. I like him. And look, Paul Skenes and Jones and what the Pirates have pitching wise. I like them too. Cubs have a better starting rotation than any of these teams. I look at the Giants and I think they stink. I have no idea how they have a better record than the Cubs. But
it's because they blew 2 games against them.
Yeah, right. And it's also because the Cubs have blown so many games they should have won with their crappy bullpen. But I like the Padres. I really like the Padres, and I really like the Diamondbacks. And I think that the Mets are kind of one of those teams that they're having fun. You watch them. Hey, man, like nobody expected them to do anything. They were talking about selling at the beginning of the year. And it's like they got Grimace, and they're having fun and, and all that. And then the Braves are just a solid team. I mean, the Braves, that they've dealt with some injuries, Acuna and, and all that. But I think that the Braves they're going to cruise through the second half of the season. I as much as I hate to say it, because I know I'm being biased, I expect the Cardinals to. But I think that the Mets, the Diamondbacks, and the Padres are all legitimate contenders. But that doesn't. What I'm saying is this: is if you're a team and you're a front office and you look at the Cubs, nothing tells you that this Cubs team is going to win a World Series. And if you're not going to win a World Series, then what are you doing to build the next World Series champion? And that's why I feel like, and you said it, take advantage of the fact that everybody thinks that they have a chance to win. Take a step back this year and bolster what you got and build for next year. You could get some really good players at the trade deadline from other teams because everybody else thinks they have a chance.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 sides to it too, because I don't think if you were the Arizona Diamondbacks at this time last year, you thought that they had a chance to win the World Series, and they went all the way there and lost 4-2 in the World Series. So like, it's obviously possible to get in and get hot. Nobody's saying it's not, but I think what Mick's point is, and I'm going to echo that, is that you shouldn't be aiming to squeak in. You should be aiming to be a contender, not a team that just barely gets in and needs a hot streak to go to the World Series. You should be a team that's expecting to go to the World Series, and the Cubs aren't there. But I also don't think at the deadline you have to tear it down. It could just be like a small step back. You can trade a few pieces, get some good pieces coming in. You get some young talent pulled up to the majors next year, and your team looks that much different. It doesn't have to be a full teardown that sets you back 4 or 5 years. It could be like what the Yankees did in 2016. They traded Chapman. They got Gleyber Torres and a few other pieces when they traded Andrew Miller and all these other things. And then boom, all of a sudden they're right back into the playoffs the year after that. I would aim and hope for something a little more aligned with that than a full teardown and 4 more years of last place, because that sucks.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we got a 10% chance to make the playoffs and a 3.4% chance to win the division. Right. Those odds suck. Okay. I just got back from Vegas. You know that. If you go on the roulette wheel or you go into the slot machine and they're like, hey, you got a 10% chance of winning and you put $100 in, guess what? 95% you're freaking losing. Okay. Yeah. That's just to make the playoffs. I mean, like 3.4% to win the division. What is it to win the World Series? It's like 0.00. You're on secret probation. Like
it's 0.4%.
I mean, come on, man. Like, when the Cubs had that team in 2016, they were always one of the odds-on favorite to win the World Series because they had a great team, right? And I know a lot of things fell into place and everything else, but that matters, man. Like the odds matter. The reason that the odds are so low is because there's an 85% chance you're not making the playoffs. So go and cash in on some of these guys, these contracts that you signed that aren't that good. If you can get out of the Bellinger contract, I know he's got the broken finger, and get some good young players back, do it. If they're not willing to give you what you want, then keep them, But if I could trade him, if I could trade Hap, as well as Hap's played this year at times, I would trade him. I'd trade Tyone. I mean, I'm building around Hollywood Pete. You saw Hollywood Pete that last game. You guys are seeing what I'm talking about. It's just a long transition before you really get the full picture of what this kid can do. And there's a lot of guys like that in this system.
Yeah, but the only thing is, and we've seen it before, just because you have a lot of guys that look like they're going to be great players doesn't mean that they're all going to hit. And we know that. Like, some of these guys aren't going to come out and pan out, which is why, of course, in the winters you go and spend money on guys that you've seen and know can do it at the big league level. But the current sum of the parts is not good enough, and that's why you have to think about getting rid of some of those guys to improve in the future. It's just hard that. I know I talked about this before, but you mentioned Jameson Taillon. Like, he's a guy that if we got this version of him last year, we coast into the playoffs. But we didn't get that version of him last year. And now the version that's good enough and you'd like, and that's what you paid for, that's the guy you have to shop in a trade. Like, it stings that way because he's a guy that could definitely be a part of winning. It's just the timing is not really matching up for him to be a part of winning here.
Yeah. And that's part of it too. You know, I looked at the draft that the Cubs just had, and I felt like that draft kind of was like, hey, we got all of these kids that are just about ready, double, triple A to get to the big leagues and contribute. Let's go and draft guys who are going to be able to kind of fit in with this class, you know, like, and I look at what they did and they're like, hey, we're going to take like college hitters. And I guarantee you that if these guys can hit, they're going to push them right up through.
Yeah.
Because part of it is that's how development is done now. But the other part of it is, so I want to get these guys to the big leagues because when Owen Casey gets there and when, you know, Alexander Canario's there every day and Pete Crow-Armstrong's there every day and James Triantos is there and Matt Shaw's there, I want these guys to be there too, or at least pushing for that. What I hope it's not is, don't tell me that you're trading Matt Shaw and James Triantos because you're looking at that 10.5%. You're going, hey, you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah, you don't want to do that. I noticed, I think it was the second round pick, Cole Mathis, the Charleston hitter.
Yeah.
He just it's like a Matt Mervis type of, like, a guy just crushes the ball.
Yeah.
Obviously we haven't seen Mervis do it in the majors yet, but the Cubs have kind of switch the thinking of drafting like high upside high school guys to just like proven college guys because they're closer to not only competing, but closer to becoming Major League Baseball players. And I think that, like, obviously Paul Skenes is a good example, but he's also a bad example because nobody in this class is that good. And you're probably not going to see a guy in the next 10 classes that good, but he was drafted a year ago and he's already starting the All-Star game. Like that, you want to draft guys that could get to the big leagues faster. And I think the Cubs have kind of adopted that mold. Obviously they did it back then too. Schwarber was a college hitter at Indiana. Bryant was a college hitter at San Diego. So you draft those guys and you get them through the system faster. And at least, you know, once you get this class of prospects up, the Caseys, the Shaws, Ballesteros, all those guys, you can kind of backfill that with guys that can still hit, you know, Cam Smith, Mathis, etc. And then you're not, you know, somebody gets hurt, you're not like, well, all of our good guys are in A ball and we're not going to see him for 4 years.
I love the Cam Smith pick. Power hitter. You know, I saw all the analytics. Like, he definitely improved. He had the great Cape Cod League. You guys saw the video. I did it right after he was drafted. But the other thing is, and I know this is from my heart as a Cubs fan, but the fact that his grandmother was a Cubs fan, I just want to put my arm around her and give her a big hug. Like,
yeah, I love it.
They're with you. They're with you, Grandma. Like, you know what? Welcome to the party, you know? But I agree with you. But I'm also saying, like, part of that is that you got this wave of guys. They all need to kind of come in at the same time. And that's why I think that right now is the time to sell, because you got to get a catcher. I mean, like,
sure.
The position of catcher is one that this organization has missed on. And there is some criticism from people, and I think it's justified, that they didn't sign Willie. And I saw where somebody leaked the Cap that, and Cap talked about it. Hey, the guy was in the locker room breaking iPads and stuff. I don't give a crap. Like, so what? Like, he's breaking iPads. You get your $1 billion business. Take it out of his money. Be like, hey man, look, sorry, but all those iPads you're breaking, you're paying for those right now. They cost $400. Some of them cost $800. But you know what? if you don't quit breaking the iPads, we're just going to keep taking it out of your wallet. Like, I know that David Ross, from what I heard, great source, was kind of fed up with him with some stuff. I saw the article that the Athletic did with him right at the beginning of the season, not Rossi, but with Willie, and Willie kind of made it sound like maybe that info that I got was right on, and I get that, man. David Ross, great Cub, and Willie's a great Cub, and but if they couldn't work it out, and Rossi thought he was going to be there long term, whatever. But you didn't have a backup plan, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
Jan Gomes isn't a backup plan, and neither is Miguel Amaya.
Yeah, you kind of got fooled because Jan Gomes had an insane year last year. Like, he was better offensively than Wilson Contreras last year, and it made Jed look like a genius. Like, obviously, one thought of getting rid of Contreras was because you have a bunch of pitchers that pitch to contact and are going to need good framing, good blocking, and that's something that Jan Gomes was really good at. And he was an upgrade defensively, and he turned out to be an upgrade offensively last year. And then the wheels fell off of both aspects this year. He was one of the league's worst defensively, and he couldn't hit to save his spot on the team. And the problem is the guy that they kind of wanted to hand the job over to naturally also can't hit to save his job on the team, and Miguel Amaya. So you had to go get Tomas Nido. You're still looking for a catcher, and obviously anybody that you're going to go get is going to be old, and it's not going to be a long-term plan. And
Right.
Ballesteros isn't a great defensive catcher, so you're still going to be on the lookout for a position like that probably for some time. And obviously, maybe he wasn't the best teammate, but if you had Contreras back there, that's at least something that you're sure of he could catch.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say this, like, catching wise, like, no one's dropping catchers. Nido is supposed to be a hitter, and he's like, I don't know, what is the stat? He's like 4 for 41 or something, or 6 for 41. It's not hitting.
Yeah, he just homered though.
He did just homer, but
that was him and Pete Crow going back to back had to be the least probable back to back that you could have came up with in the Cubs 40 man.
Yeah, you're going to see Hollywood's going to hit for power, and you're going to be like, man, I didn't see this coming. Like, trust me, the guy's got the wrists and the hands. It's an adjustment period. I think he's going to hit. I think he's going to hit for a lot more power than people think. I'm not saying he's a 30 home run guy, but I mean, he can take it out of the park. But I mean, the bottom line is this, is that it's not like you got a guy that you're going, okay, this is the next guy.
Yeah.
There's no Owen Casey at the catcher spot. And that's why the Cubs really, they drafted a catcher with their 5th round pick. I wish they could have gotten somebody with a 1st round pick, somebody that would have had, but we'll see. We'll see. If I'm going into this trade deadline and I'm looking at moving some of these guys, and Bellinger's finger's going to heal, he's going to be back. I think that they'll still be able to trade him. I'm looking for a catcher. That's one position that I'm definitely looking for. Bush at first base has been solid, getting better, having a good season. You might have to trade Nico. I'd hate to trade him. I mean, he's been pretty good, but the fact is that you got a lot of guys that can play second base, and you just drafted a bunch more. No one's taking Dansby's contract. So Dansby and you are going to be together for a long time, Cubs, like this. And then honestly, Morel, to me, Morel's on thin ice, man. Like it's just, the defense is okay, but the bat hasn't been what we thought the bat would be. And, you drafted, the first 2 picks have been listed as third base, although Matt really plays first, but whatever. I mean, like, and then you got the other guys that you're bringing up too. I think Morel's at one of those guys where you're going to have to really look hard at him moving forward. And then what are you going to do? Trade deadline in the outfield? You probably wouldn't have won many games without Hap, because he puts all his big games together on the same days, which is crazy, right? Bellinger, Tauchman, and then Suzuki. And I haven't heard Suzuki's name come up in any trade talks. I figured that if I was the Cubs, he'd be one of those guys I'd want to move.
Yeah, I think Morel's the most interesting candidate here. I've been super disappointed in what we've gotten out of him, and I knew the defense was going to be a slow burn and probably going to be pretty bad for a while. But the thought was that the bat would provide enough value for you to be able to keep him in the lineup, and it really hasn't. He had a scorching hot couple of weeks to begin the season, and then was like one of the worst hitters on the team for a while. had 2 homers to close out the first half, has 18 on the year, which is a very respectable number. But the rest of the numbers aren't good enough. He's not getting on base enough. He comes up in clutch situations all the time and rolls over, ground out, or strikes out. He doesn't hit. He just swings. And I think that's something that he could work on, but just doesn't. It's similar to like Javi, where you're just going up there trying to hit a homer and you're going to connect on it because you're a very talented athlete, but it's not good enough to be in that lineup every day. And kudos to Counsell for finally dropping him out of the cleanup spot. He isn't good enough to be a cleanup hitter right now. But the fact that the Cubs decided to not address third base at all in order to give this guy like the runway to take the job, and he's done everything but take the job. Like, he's just made you question what we're going to do at that spot in the future. It's a little bit concerning. Power's obviously there, and you know he's going to hit homers when he goes to another team, and that's something that Cubs fans are going to be upset about. Why didn't we keep him? But the value that he's providing you on a day-to-day basis at third base and in the lineup is not good enough to justify him stealing that spot from somebody else.
Yeah, and it's been too inconsistent. I mean, like the power comes, but he's just, I don't know, man. I mean, like at some point he's kind of a role guy, I mean, like you either run with it or you don't run with it, and he's not running with it. So, and the fact that you have to have another guy to play defense when he's in the game also tells you, like, that's just not Major League Baseball, unless you're really smashing the ball. Like, now I got to have 2 guys to do your job because you're not good enough to do it. So, but yeah, you mentioned it, seller's market. I think those are the kind of the questions, as far as the Cubs are concerned on selling. But what about this right here? Who do you think, and I'm gonna let you start this one, the Cubs should avoid selling?
I think the Cubs should definitely hang on to the 2 lefties in the rotation. I think Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga need to be parts of the next Cubs team. Like, you can have a lot of turnover in that lineup, but this Cubs rotation has been so good. That's what you need to win off of. And I think those are 2 guys that you'd like to keep on the squad. I think Michael Busch has shown you more than enough to earn playing and being at least in the conversation for first or second or third in the lineup for the Cubs' future. And then I think obviously Pete Crow-Armstrong, rookie, that's a guy you want to keep on the roster. Dansby Swanson's a guy that you have to keep on the roster. And then I would hang on to Happ. I'd be okay with trading Suzuki, but I would keep Ian Happ. I think
Those big games have been big, dude.
They've been big. I think he provides a lot, obviously defensively, really good on base guy. He's a well-respected voice in that locker room. Aside from Hendricks, he's the longest tenured Cub. He's a guy that I think has done enough to be featured on the next Cubs winning team instead of a piece that we get rid of to help form the next Cubs winning team.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I'm not arguing. I kind of feel like with Happ, I mean, he's quiet, but when he's loud, man, he is loud. I mean, those games, this team would be way down in the cellar if it wasn't for him. I mean, he's come up with some of the best games of the year, and without him, there's no telling how bad things would be for these Cubs. So, all right, you said here's something I wanted to talk about that you put on here. Did Paul Skenes deserve the All-Star game nod?
I'm asking specifically, did he deserve to start?
Oh, I know what you mean. That's
okay.
What the nod is. The nod is you're going.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure, because I think we could both agree he's definitely deserving of being an all-star without a doubt.
But he's become like a star player. Like, it's not what the crazy thing about the game is that there's certain players that step in and you're like, holy crap. Like, this guy's legitimately, like, who cares how old he is or how much experience he's got? He threw a no-hitter in his second start. Like, I know that they pulled him out after 6, which is the weak part about our game right now. But I love him, man. I mean, like, I hate the fact that we're gonna have to face this guy.
I know,
in the division, which we really don't play the division as much as we used to. But the other thing too, and you mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to kind of bring it up, is that the draft is hard. Okay. I'm about to do a podcast with Tim Wilkin. We're going to recap the Cubs draft, and we're going to talk about the entire draft. He's a scouting director. When you're a scouting director, your dream is to have Paul Skenes because the first round pick, you got the first overall pick. Hey, there's no, I mean, you kicking the tires on somebody else? No, you're just figuring out how much you're going to pay him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think Paul Skenes is one of the great stories in baseball this season. I got to give a quick shout out. He's a mustache guy. Love the mustache.
Mustache.
But he has come into the major leagues and immediately been the best player on the field in every single game that he's played. And that's an all-star. And you think about the National League and who were some of the guys who have pitched better. He obviously doesn't qualify innings yet, but his ERA is as good as anybody's. Zach Wheeler has had a really strong year for Philadelphia, but he was banged up, so he couldn't pitch in the All-Star game. That takes him out of the conversation. Tyler Glasnow had a really strong start to the season, had a few rough starts before he got injured. That takes him out of the conversation. So unless you wanted Reynaldo Lopez or Chris Sale to start the All-Star game for the National League, Paul Skenes was an absolute shoo-in to start that game. He has the most talent of any pitcher in the league, and he also brings eyes to the game. Everybody wanted to see Juan Soto hit against this guy.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to see what Aaron Judge would do against this guy. Everybody wanted to watch him warm up. Did you see Shota Imanaga was mic'd up and they had the translation and they said, Shota, it's time to take a picture. And he was like, I want to watch him warm up. Like, this guy's must-see TV for the guys he plays with. His peers want to watch him. That guy was a no-brainer to start the All-Star game.
No. And I described him to me. He's like Doc Gooden, young Doc Gooden, like coming up through when he was Dwight, before he was Doc, the doctor. He was Dwight Gooden, and he was coming up through the Mets system. And then he gets to the big leagues, and he's just like dicing and slicing and cutting down dudes. And it was like, okay, Skenes is the same way. I mean, like, his game is there. He didn't need the minor leagues, and there's not many guys like that. And he was in the minor leagues, and they're cutting down his pitch counts, and he's just getting fed up with it. He's like, look, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Put me in. I'm ready to go. And then he gets up there, and we saw the first two starts the guy had, and he's just done nothing but get better. So no, it was exciting. You brought up Shota, the only Cub in the All-Star game, and he got the job done, and he deserved it, man. Like what the beginning of the season, Shota mania, like Fernando Valenzuela.
Hey guys, he said it right.
I know Fernando. No accent involved there, but Fernando mania and Shota mania, kind of the same thing through the first 9 starts. And I loved like seeing the Cubs video where they say he's going to be an all-star, and he's like, I'm going to have my chest out, wearing my stuff. Like, great job, brother. Great. And the question I have for you, and we all saw Shota pitch and all that stuff. 2 things about the All-Star game that we got to talk about. First off, how bad was the national anthem? So bad that the lady that sung it put herself, not at the All-Star game, but the home run derby, I guess it was. She put herself in rehab because she was drunk. And then that was one thing. And then the second thing, and I'm going to give my opinion, I am one of the people that liked the uniforms. The only thing I didn't like is that I just want to know what team everyone plays for. So if they would have just made the logo of the team that they played for a little more visible, I'd have been happy. But I thought the National League hat and uniform was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the national anthem for the Derby. There's not much to say about it. It was really bad. And she said that she was drunk and it was an out of character moment for her, and she's going to go get some help. So best of luck for, her situation through rehab. As for the uniforms, I like the last few years. Last year's the Seattle ones I didn't like at all. But the other years that we've done these like different uniforms for the game, I haven't minded them. I just wish they would flip the days and have them wear like the American and National League stuff during the Derby and have that be like the big like all-star jersey day, and then let them wear their own uniform in the all-star game, because that's what we always say. Like, we're always like, Shota Imanaga representing the Cubs in the All-Star game. Let him wear a Cubs uniform. Show off the pinstripes. Like, that sort of thing I think is cool. Or like in 2016, you got 4 Cubs on the infield. Like, if you saw those guys in pinstripes or in the road grays, because I think it was National League was on the road that year. Like, that's awesome to put them that way. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I would just flip them. I understand each stadium trying to incorporate a way to get involved with the uniforms, and it's really cool for the fans of that team. And obviously, fans of a player, you can go get an all-star jersey, but during the actual game, I think it's more pure if they wear their own.
The national anthem thing to me, people sent it to me. I got a lot of people that sent that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, what do you think of this? And, I went through and I watched it. I remember Ernie Harwell talking about bringing a guy on for the World Series in like 68 maybe. And he saw, he played guitar and he did a national anthem and was really trying, wasn't drunk, really trying. People were like, they felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Except there was a lot. It was a lot different back then because people had I think they had a lot more patriotism back then than they do now. Right. The thing to me though, was the timing was so bad. You had an assassination attempt on Saturday. And I remember Whitney Houston, who I got to tell you, and people that know me, I've always had a crush on Whitney Houston. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I think she's beautiful. I think she's got the best voice. It is a guilty pleasure when I'm driving in the car and I'll put some Whitney Houston on and, sing along with her. I think she's the best. And then she got on and sang the national anthem, and people take that recording. And that was right after 9/11, right? And they take that recording and they play it all the time. And it was like a national sense of pride when the country kind of needed a pick me up. There's that same sense now. And then for this person who I didn't even know, just to go out there and just absolutely tank the national anthem compared to like Roseanne Barr, who, did a terrible national anthem, but it was kind of like a joke. I think she was just being like a comedian, and it went over like a lead weight, I honestly, it was like, I guess if you're trying to get fame, because I never heard of her before, we know who she is now, right? But she missed a moment where, maybe if you have like a Whitney Houston type of performance, you bring people together instead of just going, man,
Yeah. I mean, look at Chris Stapleton 2 years ago at the Super Bowl had such a good national anthem that the players on the sideline had like tears coming down.
Yeah.
Like, that it's such a powerful song, or it should be such a powerful song that invokes like every time I'm at Wrigley and either Wayne Messmer or John Vincent sing the national anthem, I get goosebumps right before the game. Like I'm ready to go out there and run the bases or go flag down a fly ball. And it's just like, it should invoke so much pride in you. And like that obviously was a huge dud. And like you mentioned 9/11, obviously this is a little different, but it's still, an attack. And 9/11, you had the president of the United States go out there and throw the first pitch right down the middle. And like, that was awesome. Whether like whatever party you align with, that was a cool moment. And like, if it wasn't a strike, it wouldn't have been as cool right down the middle. Like it was, it was perfect. And I'm not saying that you needed something or that the country needed as big of a pick me up as they did back in 2001, but this was a scary week for the country, regardless of, again, where you side on either side. You don't want to see assassination attempts. You don't want to see anything like that. And for that song to be like the biggest display of pride and patriotism in our country to go that poorly, it just is kind of indicative of the time we're in right now.
Yeah, and that's what everybody was texting me. Like, if you want to know what it's like to be an American right now, listen to this. I'm like listening through and I'm like, God, it's the second worst national anthem I've ever heard. The first one, I was in Chattanooga before a game, and this girl, I could see her right now. She had a Girl Scout uniform on, and she was a girl, but she didn't really fit the Girl Scout uniform. She was a little bit bigger for the uniform. And then she was singing, and I was like, it was awful. And I was like, somebody's telling her right now that this is good.
Yeah. Wait, so she was like too old to be a Girl Scout?
No, she was just like she had outgrown her uniform, but wore it anyway. Maybe she had some of the cookies. I don't know. I deal with the same thing. I just don't sing, right?
Yeah.
The bottom line to me is that we have we live in a great country, man. Like, where we can get together and talk baseball and all this stuff. And that was a missed moment. But I thought that the Texas did a great job at the All-Star game. you can't do anything other than put people in an opportunity to succeed or fail. And just the fact that that people cared enough to say, hey, you know what, that stunk, tells you that they still care about the country and the anthem and all of that stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do one more Cubs thing before we wrap this up. Obviously, second half starts on Friday. Cubs play the Diamondbacks for 3, and then they play Milwaukee for 3 before an off day a week from today. Now, let me ask you this, Mick. Obviously, Justin Steele, he's going to get the first start coming out of the break. Shota Imanaga is obviously going to get a start coming out of the break, as will Jameson Taillon. I think Craig Counsell said he won't start until the Milwaukee series to give him some extra days since he pitched the last game of the first half. Now, that leaves 2 spots for 3 guys. Javier Assad, who is now healthy, still kind of working back to his pitch count, but still obviously healthy and back in the fold. Kyle Hendricks, who has obviously had some clunkers this season, but just put together a really strong outing against St. Louis on Friday. And then Hayden Wesneski, who was kind of jockeyed back and forth between starting and coming out of the bullpen and got absolutely rocked. Obviously, his defense and his own defense included didn't help him much, but you can't give up 9 runs in an inning. So where would you go for the rotation? Let's assume they go Steele Friday, Imanaga Saturday. Give me somebody for Sunday and Monday, assuming Taillon will go like Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm going to take Hendricks over Wesneski. I mean, I'm not buying in on the Wesneski. I'm so tired of watching the whiplash on the home runs, like, whew, and then he'll have like the good game, but then there's a lot of others. He just gives up too many home runs for me.
Sure.
I don't know. Like Hendricks, I mean, he's had a bad year too, but honestly, like he's been getting better and better. And that last start against the Cardinals, I think it's like a flipper coin with those two. And I like Assad. Look, I mean, Assad didn't have his best stuff last time, but he still keeps you in the game.
Right.
That was the first time back. He's going to be rusty. It's going to be interesting to see, though, if the Cubs trade Taillon, which I would if I was them. Hendricks, if anybody would take him, I'd trade him too.
Mm-hmm.
And what the rotation would look like after that, what Cade Horton's going to be like when he gets back.
Yeah.
Sometime in July. And then, they didn't take hardly any pitchers in the draft, in the upper part of the draft, right. 2 guys in the first 10 picks, which tells you that they were going heavy on
the
position
offense.
Players, right, on offense. So it's really going to be interesting, and I say fun too, but interesting second half of the season, even though we're past the halfway point, but the All-Star break.
Yeah.
What's it going to look like? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Assad has to be. I think he's done enough this year to show that he deserves to be in that starting rotation. I don't know how you could watch the last time through the rotation and not lean Hendricks. I think he's proven that he is on the way down in terms of ERA and on the way up in terms of performance. And then Wesneski, what I was going to ask you is, would you send him back down to Iowa or would you put him back in the bullpen? Because I think bullpen. But the Cubs currently, after optioning Daniel Palencia the other day, they have a 26-man roster spot open. So somebody from the minors could come up, or they could be acquiring somebody. I'm not sure.
Well, they just made the trade. Do you think the guy that they just traded for?
I guess it could be. Let me look at his name. I don't have it in front of me, but the Cubs did make a trade. What was it with Toronto that they traded with?
Kansas City.
Oh, Kansas City, right. They got a pitcher from Kansas City. So maybe it could be him. I'm looking for his name right now. Righty reliever, Jesus Tinoco.
Yeah, Tinoco. Yep.
Okay, so maybe he could be the guy that comes up and fills that 26-man spot. Maybe it's Hunter Biggie coming back up, but that would be weird to put him down for 0 games and then bring him back up. I liked what I saw from Ethan Roberts, too. He really didn't have any bad outings. They just kind of ran out of room for him, but he's a guy I think will pitch a lot in the second half. But yeah, this roster could look a lot different a month from now. But do you think, because there's only a limited amount of time before that trade deadline, do you think that there is anything the Cubs could do to change your mind and maybe not fully buy, but not sell?
Man, unless I don't. I just don't see this as a World Series championship team. I'm afraid that the front office makes deals to save their butts instead of making the team better down the future. And I want to see them kind of push some of these guys out, these salaries, cut payroll, and then go and get some prospects. And, and let's go into spring training next year and get closer to having a team that can win a World Series instead of having a team that is always in this spot. And that's the problem I have with them. They're always in this spot. They're like the guy that shows up late to do the exam. He didn't do the work that it took to get ready for the exam. You know the guy I'm talking about? And then they roll out with a C and they're like, well, I passed, like I want an A student. I want that team that makes the little things easy. And then that pushes them to do big things down the line, because I don't feel like the Cubs have a team like that. I feel like the Dodgers have a team like that. I feel like the Braves have a team like that. I feel like the Phillies have a team like that. You want to be amongst that group, because those are the teams that have the better odds to win the World Series. And if your odds to win the World Series are under 1, then you really have to look internally and go, hey, and we did the same thing last year. So if they fall for the same trick again and they don't make the playoffs, if I'm the owner, I'm just saying, hey, man, I got to find somebody. And I'm not advocating to fire anybody. Don't get me wrong. I know these people and I like them. I'm just saying, if I know Tom too. And if I'm Tom, I'm going, hey, you know what? We have to have a plan that is pushing us from where we're at right now to winning a World Series. That's the bottom line. It's always got to be the bottom line. Winning the World Series, not making the playoffs. You got to make the playoffs to win the World Series, but you also have to have a team that can make the playoffs, win the playoffs to be the champion.
Yeah, I agree. I look at this team and I've seen it in spurts this year that this team is good enough to do that. It's just they haven't done it consistently, and they have 15 days to prove it, and then that's not enough time, obviously. But if they fall for the trick again, you have to make the playoffs, which is why you brought in Craig Counsell. It's to turn those late one-run games into wins instead of losses. It's to turn that September into not a collapse. And so, let's say they do get super hot, maybe that's when Counsell can actually start managing and be a factor, and the Cubs can make the playoffs. And again, I think if you keep this team together, the pitching is good enough where you put them in any series and the Cubs have a shot to win it. I truly believe that. I think Steele, Imanaga, Tyone, and even maybe by then Ben Brown, more than good enough to go win you a ball game in the playoffs. It's just, can they get there? And we'll see.
We'll see. Well, look, I had fun.
I had fun too. I love doing this.
This is like hey, we got a little extra time.
Yeah.
Let's go and do this. Maybe we need to do this, the Friendly Confines Weekly, every week again.
Yeah, well, it says weekly. We might as well.
Let's just do it. Guys, you get in the comment section and tell us what you think, and maybe we'll just do this thing live so you guys can get in on the conversation as well. So for Anthony, I'm Mick. Thanks for hanging out. Like and subscribe, thumbs up, do all the things that make this channel go. And from the bottom of our hearts, man, we appreciate you guys so much. Watching our shows, being a part of the channel, and just kind of living and dying with the Cubs with us every day, which is honestly, the dying is a little bit better because of you guys. All right, go Cubs, everybody.
Go Cubs.